Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to another Critique of the Week. It is Friday, May 21st. Man, time flies by. It is already almost June. And we're doing another Critique of the Week, as we always do, every Friday afternoon to start off your weekend. As always, the point of the Critique of the Week is to give that workshop experience to one poet every week. But not only that, it's also to just talk about poems in that kind of way that you think more about how the poems are landing on you, which helps you with your own poetry too. And so it's a big feedback thing where we all get to sort of think more deeply about the way poems are operating and learn as we go. And it's a lot of fun, so please do leave your comments in the chat windows if you're new. Watch on Facebook and YouTube and pass those along. So hello to James Cicillo over there and Lois Perch Villamere. Good to see you from Annapolis, Maryland. Let's see what we got. We got Spartacus and Sally D over on YouTube. Let's get started with this critique. Looks kind of like a pretty a light house today. Maybe the summer fun is kicking in. Actually, I was thinking, and maybe I should talk about this later, but let me know. I'll say it now. I'm thinking about maybe moving the time to the morning. Do you like this time, or would you prefer 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern? I guess that wouldn't be morning for everybody. Just wondering about that. I've been kind of debating about whether or not this is the right time or the best time or not. So let me know what you think in the comments there too. But anyway, let us dive into today's poem, or pair of poems actually. And these poems are by Fareh Malik. And they're both prose poems, so maybe we can talk a little bit about that. Let me see if I can get the lighting a little better. Okay. The first one is Temporary Faith. I think I turned let me darken it a little bit. Let's see. Let me adjust the camera settings here. I'm trying to tweak them to make them as clear as possible. It feels like it used to be more clear. Maybe if I turn... There we go. That's probably a little better. Okay. So this is A Temporary Faith. There are dust-tinted journals on the bookshelf from when I was lonely. They're filled to the brim with passages entered 6 months apart as the numbers of my friends swayed like the tides. The same wavelength that attempts an explanation from my mom about why I prayed 5 times a day when she was sick, and then stopped altogether afterwards. It is the Icarus in me that desires melted wax wings when I have good things going. It is the reason I have loved too shallow and too short, too deeply and too long. My conviction has proved to be more short matchstick than candle, and it burns my hand all too often. Comfort has writhed itself around my limbs and squeezed my muscles into submission far too many times before. And someone once told me that it is most important to persevere when you get comfortable. Harsh rapids are easy. I am still trying to figure out how to keep my boat moving forward in still waters. Put myself up there too. A prose poem, A Temporary Faith. And I think let's start a couple line by line. A Temporary Faith is a title. Is kind of interesting. It's not. It doesn't give you much of a sense of where we are yet. But it's interesting. A temporary faith. It's something that raises a question in your mind, which you assume the poem might answer. So I like that as a title. I think it was a good start. There are dust-tinted journals on the bookshelf from when I was lonely. That's the way to start. So we get this image to start of these journals on a bookshelf. They're filled to the brim. That's, of course, filled to the brim is a cliche there. So that's not, we want to get rid of that and say it in a more interesting way. With the passages entered 6 months apart, as the numbers of my friends swayed like the tides. So the concept here is that, as loneliness rises, like the tide of loneliness rises, the journals get full. And so this is a cliche here. Passages enter months apart as the numbers of my friends swayed like tides. There's a small point here. But if you're going to use a metaphor, which is great to use metaphor all the time, swaying like the tide is the sort of a simile is like the weakest way to use a metaphor. What if we And then later we have this boat image too, right? Keep my boat moving forward in still waters. So we have this tide and this boat image here. And imagine if you just shifted the way this is said, wouldn't it be stronger? So passages entered 6 months apart as the number of, instead of as the number of my friends, which is a sort of a clunky, sort of longer phrase, right? What if it was as the tide of, or tides of friendship? What if we did that? And see how that, like, it cuts right into the metaphor immediately without, like, setting it up, which makes it a much more powerful, like, visual, and just a more striking, salient kind of image. So what if it was tides of friendship there? So you get the same image, and then they could do something instead of where you can actually imagine some kind of description of the tide as it goes out, and then it could play into the boat later. Down here we have this boat that we are trying to keep moving forward. And so that's the kind of thing to look for is to weigh, because this poem is interesting. There's a lot of interesting content here. It's you can easily to follow. A little bit of clunkiness is going, a little too much wordiness is pretty much the main thing here. So I think we're going to go through and just pick out the places where the poem is a little wordy unnecessarily, and that's what we'll start with here. So the same wavelength that attempts an explanation for my mom. Why I prayed. So see this whole thing that attempts an explanation for my mom. That's a big thing, but you could just say, I tell my mom why I prayed 5 times a day. Like, jump right in, just skip all over this clunky stuff, right? I prayed 5 times a day when she was sick, and then stopped altogether afterwards. You could just jump right into, let's see, the same wavelength that attempts an explanation for my mom about why I prayed 5 times a day. So somehow, like, you could find a way to rephrase it just to get rid of this whole first half, which is just a lot of syllables that don't really add a lot to it. So you lose sort of the punchiness, the connection that you have with the reader, really, by using too many words. You can jump right into there, and then instead of saying when she, could just say my mom. Like, just, you could even, what if it was like the tides of friendship going in and out or whatever? Then I prayed 5 times a day when my mom was sick. See how direct that, the story comes out in that just simple change? Instead of this attempting an explanation, which is just too much clutter. So jump right in there. It is Icarus in me, or it is the Icarus in me that desires melted wax wings. I want to have good things going. So Icarus is a very common thing to bring up. I'm not sure that we need, melted wax wings, because once you know that you're talking about the story of Icarus, you know about the whole story. It's such a common story that that you could cut out this part too, and just jump. Maybe I'll just cross out the stuff that you can cut. So like this, and all, and then here, it is the Icarus in me. That is the reason I've loved. Could we cut right to that, possibly? Because we know what Icarus means, so we don't need to know these wings. We know it, and then let us make that leap and that connection. And then you need like a that or something, just some kind of connective tissue. But then I love this. This is my favorite line in the poem right here. I have loved too shallow and too short, too deeply and too long. That's just really good. A really simple way to say that, but a complicated concept. And it contains a lot in that line. And a lot of times we talk about how a simple line is usually the most powerful, like, heart of the poem, and they kind of come out spontaneously. And this feels like the section that's the heart of the poem to me. I've loved too shallow and too short, too deeply and too long. And that's the kind of thing that, like, you wonder, is that a cliche because it's so good, But then Google has never seen that phrase before. So let's see. I'm just looking up in the comments really quick. So everyone's saying this is a good time. Okay, we'll keep it at the same time. Of course, the sample is biased. The survey is biased because you're the people who this is a good time for, because you're here right now. But I think, the only thing I'm thinking is that we have a lot more of an audience in India And this is just a horrible time in India. It's like 3 or 4 a.m. right now. But, right, yeah. So, I don't know. So I was thinking maybe to pull it forward for them. But I do like this time. I like kicking off the weekend this way. It kind of feels like it's the end of my week. And, and then it gets in the... So I like it, but okay. Anyway, back to the poem. So I love that line. I have loved too shallow and too short, too deeply and too long. Like you could put that in a, I mean, that could be on a t-shirt, that could be on an Instagram post or something. I mean, that's a great line that really has a lot of resonance. My conviction has proved, I wonder why not proved and not proven, to be more short matchstick than candle. And again, my conviction has proved to be more. Like what? That's a lot of unnecessary. You could just start out with this capital M. More short matchstick than candle. And then you got to move the conviction. My conviction burns my hand all too often. Maybe not even too often. But so what I'm working on really is cutting out this clutter because it doesn't add anything and it detracts because it's taking up room without, like it's not providing any insight into the voice. It's not providing any energy in that way. And it's not providing any extra detail, really. Like a lot of poems, especially a prose poem, you can get really into the voice of it, where it's sort of like a dramatic monologue that's like building up and has its own energy, which I think I skimmed the other poem before going on air, and it seems like it's working in there in that one. But in this one, I don't get that sense. It's much more of there's much more of a distance between the voice of the speaker and the thoughts of the speaker, if that makes sense. So this I would cut stuff that isn't adding anything. Comfort has writhed itself around my limbs and squeezed my muscles into submission far too many times before. So again, we get the far too many times before, which is cluttery. Comfort has writhed itself around my limbs and squeezed my muscles into submission. And you just, you get rid of that. Someone told me that it is most important to persevere when you get comfortable. Harsh rapids are easy. I'm still trying to figure out how to keep my boat moving forward in still waters. So we get this really nice image at the end. And I wonder, see, this poem doesn't really feel completely developed to me. And I think the comment which I put down at the bottom, oh, and I should say if anybody wants to follow on Instagram, it's a Fareh Malik Poetry. And on Instagram, that's how you found it. But Fareh had 2 questions to talk about, and I keep forgetting to do these, so I actually pasted it into the file right now. He says, "It is unclear what my message is if it is unclear what my message is in the prose poem, how can I make my intent more accessible without oversimplifying? I want to maintain my level of abstract metaphor work, but also have people understand the emotions in the poem." And I think the way to think about that is to make sure, you can go into abstract metaphor and like make leaps that we don't necessarily follow all the way, and you can be creative in that way. What's really required is an anchor so that we know where we are, like a touchstone or something, another way to say it. So we know like where we are and what it's about, even if we don't quite get it. And if it's pushing sort of the limits of our own imagination, understanding where you're going with that. It's important too to sort of have some piece of grounding, like some like foot still on the land, or some, an anchor like holding us to where the poem really is. And so here with the temporary faith, we know the subject matter. We're talking about why faith is temporary and what we're talking about, so that sort of grounds us there. And then we get this, the feeling of how friendship moves and things change. And so we sort of know the situation fine. So I think that maybe in this poem you're being too careful. Too careful about staying close and not going far enough. Because I think this image, the waters, I'm imagining it's only one line, but I imagine this boat sort of stuck, drifting very slowly, and paddling and not really being able to get anywhere. And I think that's a really great image. And it relates to the tides here, too. And I think there's just a lot more potential for what to do. And so I would push this image farther and play with this poem more on that level. Let me see. Okay, so James Silla says short matchstick and burnt hand is interesting. Yeah, that was a good image too. T.R. Paulson says I love the opening image. Your dust tinted journals on the bookshelf from when I was lonely. And there's a simplicity to that line too, and it really situates us well. I think that's a good line. Thanks for pointing that out. Nate Jacob says the same ebb and flow to my prayers for the tide. If we did tides of friendship, I don't know. I think there's some creative way. If you inserted that in here, there's some extra you could put that's image based and creative off of that, and then build up. Set us up for this image later. I think that would work. Nate Jacob says somehow carry the Icarus portion into the sea where he fell to continue the extended metaphor. Yeah, that's the thing. That would be a possibility. There are a lot of different ways that you could extend this. There's like a little bit of image that's very deep with metaphor, and it could be pushed farther, I think. Let's see. So T.R. Paulson says, yeah, overwritten wordy. Love the Icarus reference, but it doesn't need to be this explained. Why not try this as a sonnet or duplex? It feels like that would be the right length. It does feel like the right length for a sonnet. I think, because it's a prose poem, it feels maybe shorter than it is. Like, it reads pretty long. And then when you cut out the unnecessary words, it does end up in sort of a sonnet type length. Mira Whitmore says, I don't mind proved. It has an old English sage tone about it, wizened, if you will. That's interesting. And I don't know, my conviction has proved to be more. Yeah, I think both are correct. I don't know the difference. I'm not even sure. They both sound fine, but one sounds a little more normal, and one sounds like Meyer said, a little more old sage-ish. Let's see. Mark Grinier says, writing this in poetic lines might make it easier to say things efficiently, particularly if you set form. So that's what T.R. Paulson was talking about too. It is easier to, particularly if you need to set form. Form often shapes the content and makes it better. Lots of good images here. Yeah, I totally agree. Good points there, Mark. James Pasillo says, I suggest removing someone once told me line. It is exposition and not, that's the word, exposition. Yeah, exposition is the stuff that we don't need here. Yeah, I should have pointed out too. Someone once told me. You just jump right in. Like, have the sort of the confidence. Unless this is referencing someone, if it's referencing someone in particular, then we should know who, or at least some kind of sense of the direction of who, if that's relevant to the poem. And if not, there's no reason to say it. So it is most important to persevere when you get comfortable. Like, just saying something as a truth gives it the ring of truth, and so it's stronger that way if you do that. Let's see. Let me look over at YouTube now. So Spartacus says, Theseus went with boat to Crete to face the Minotaur. Icarus and Daedalus escaped by flying. It's true. It's almost like if you focus on the boat, you're sort of mixing metaphors a little bit. And I wonder if maybe that metaphor, that mythological metaphor, is something maybe to tap into more in this poem. Sort of as like grist for pushing it farther. Spartacus also says, too deeply and too long is powerful. Could it be associated with flying too close and too far away from the sun? Yeah, I think that might be the resonance of it too. I thought that was a great line. Like, that line could be a poem on its own. That's really good. I like that. And so simple too. Like, notice that. Now the other question that Fareh mentioned was some of the emotions led me to use. I think this is talking about the other one, because there is a curse word in the other one. Also, some of the emotions led me to using curse words to evoke anger, frustration, etc. Is this a good idea? does having curse words decrease the likelihood of getting this piece published? So about curse, I don't think we've ever talked about curse words on here. It's something that I find really interesting, actually. I always thought, I always sort of had the assumption that swear words were sort of like cultural constructs, like a word becomes taboo, and then the fact that it's taboo, for like Puritan reasons or whatever, imbues it with a power, which makes it even more taboo. So it's kind of a feedback loop, but it's all cultural. And it turns out that, maybe that's why the specific words that we have as curse words are curse words, but it's actually a lot more complicated than that. The curse words are working on a totally different, psychological or neurological program. They're actually like using the limbic system and processed through the basal ganglia and not like the frontal lobe, like most of our languages. So, similar to, it's the same sort of ancient systems that, prairie dogs have, words for different predators. They have, one sort of bark if it's a hawk that they're trying to hide from and warning each other about, and then they'll go hide or they'll freeze and try to find cover, and then if it's a snake bark, they'll all go to like high ground and start trying to scare off the snake. And if it's a coyote, they'll go in their burrows, or a badger. There's different calls for different animals. So they have their own words, but they're almost like shouts of fear, sort of spontaneous through the limbic system that emerged into language because it's useful for their tribe. You're less likely to be eaten by the hawk if you know what your friend is screaming about. And that circuit still exists within us. And that's what swear words are running on. So they're reflexes. And we know this through studies of people with Tourette's syndrome and aphasia with brain damage and things like that, where those involuntary words are less inhibited, and so they come out more with those disorders. And so we know that we're operating on a whole different system, which is sort of new research. But anyway, the point is, when you use a swear word, it's not just that the reader is saying, oh no, he used that word. It's actually affecting the receiver on like a deeper emotional, on the limbic system level, which is what governs our emotions. So it's sort of like out of nowhere, bam, and a slap in the face or something. And the effect is to sort of agitate and startle because it operates on that system. And so I think swear words are an important tool in a writer's kit, but you have to be aware of that's what you're doing. So they're sort of like for a quick jolt, to bring people back into the, paying more attention, sort of the, what is that scream in the distance? That's the kind of function. So as long as you're using it for that purpose and understand what you're doing, I think that there's no reason not to, because you're a writer and everything should be at your disposal. As far as literary magazines go, I don't think anybody censors language in that way. Unless you're writing for young people or trade magazines or things. If we publish a poem with swear words, I won't quote it for social media, because social media algorithms decrease the reach for words like that for the same reason, because people don't like them. And people don't like them because it's like you're being slapped in the face with a scream of panic or something, So it all makes sense. But that's what I think about. So if you use them effectively, I think they're good to use, but you should use them sparingly so they have the power, and only when you want to sort of slap the reader in the face a little bit. And there is a swear word in this, so we'll cover your ears, hide your children. But we'll read this one, and let's talk about this poem too. Oh, and the other interesting thing about this poem is this has been published. Fareh sent these poems in 7 or 8 months ago, and in the time since, this poem has actually been published. But Fareh asked if we'd do it again, or do it anyway. So that's what we're going to do. After 9/11, the war spilled into our hometown and made us grow up too fast, and my homie's sister don't wear her hijab no more. And all my friends on the ball team say they got back when they overhear one of the dudes from the school across town say, I heard their team's got a fucking Muslim on it, and my face stays a silent obelisk, a statued testament to normalcy as I barely hear him. Yo, my ears have no capacity for bigotry ever since they were flooded the other day with the sounds of mosque windows smashing open to an uncensored night sky. And I want to tell this boy that the brick that they threw that day was 10 times heavier than the words you're floating up into the room right now. But that remark isn't nearly enough satisfaction, so it curls up into a ball inside of me, and I ball my fist into vengeful demolition, a wrecking ball winding up to do to his stomach what they did to the houses of my friends from Palestine. But I don't, because this ain't our part of town, and I'm reminded of when my cousins got caught cutting through the wrong New York alleyway by some rednecks with a pistol, and damn, I never realized that a 9mm barrel can look black ocean wide when you're scared enough. And yeah, sure, we made it home safe, but our walk back held a tragic, furious kind of silence that burned our throats like salt water whenever we tried to speak its name through a drowning rage. And so we swallowed it down and plastered it to our diaphragm, and for years we would taste it on our breath until one day Alexis drives by our neighborhood and yells out, "Go home, you fucking packies." And we try to let it go because Auntie told us to keep a low profile, and Uncle won't even let us wear bomber jackets because they're called bomber jackets, and even that's too risky. But there is still an angry sea in our bellies, and the red light they get caught at cracks open a dam, and it tempts us to run up on them, and so we do, and this time it's we who shatter the windows. So that is I think that's a great poem. In the first poem, we talked about how there was a lot of clutter, a lot of exposition that wasn't necessary. But because the voice isn't sort of a central aspect of the poem as it is right now, but here, this run-on sentence, it's like building up speed, is such a dramatic monologue. It just works really well, I think, throughout. And there's great images too. This, let's see. I love this, so it curls up into a ball inside of me, and I ball my fist into vengeful demolition, a wrecking ball winding up. I might say I might skip the vengeful demolition and go right to the wrecking ball. But, because it's speech, you get a lot more flexibility, though, because you're trying to evoke the way speech would go. But I think maybe skipping right to the wrecking ball would be good. But then this, like down here, I never realized that a 9mm barrel can look black ocean wide. Like that, black ocean wide is just what we were talking about here with how my friends swayed like the tides isn't as strong as saying tides of friendship. Putting the black ocean wide. You could say barrel can look wide as a black ocean, right? But how much stronger is it now when we say black ocean wide right here? So that's just really good. So a lot of good stuff in this poem, a lot of great images. And then there's a drama too. I felt I was getting more engaged in the poem. I think maybe if we were still editing this, it's published. I hate, editing a published poem, but I think maybe you could get quicker in, cut back just a little bit up here. Because the story really picks up, tension really builds in the second half, and you can sort of feel it sort of coming out in a more spontaneous way. And then there's the tension of like, what are we going to do with this Lexus as it drives by, shouting this out the window? And then it stopped at a light, and then this great thing about the bomber jackets, just a great detail. And it makes it feel very real and authentic, and like you're there and you understand being in the speaker's shoes for a moment, which is what poetry is all about. But too risky. And so we even up to here, we didn't even know what they're going to do. And then at the last end, we do. And so there's like a resolution too at the end. So I just thought this was good and a good example of kind of what's some of the things that are missing from the other poem. Like this sort of takes the ball and runs with it, so to speak. And the other one hesitates and like hangs back a little bit. And it doesn't have the same voice and the same sense of energy being propelled through speech. But I thought this was just excellent. I don't really have any, other than maybe I would get into it a little quicker. I wonder what you could cut. But even that, the effect that you sort of the energy sort of gradually builds works pretty well too. And then of course the title tells us like what the poem's about, and then we get to experience it more directly through the poem. So, I don't know. I don't know if I have anything else to say about this. It's just a good one. Let's see. Yeah. So I don't know if anybody even else has any suggestions for this poem. Is there any other questions or anything? No, I don't think so. Yeah, so this is good. I wonder where it was published. Let's see. Back to the swearing. There's also the function of curse words to disrupt the tone of reasoned discourse by adding emotional intensity. Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. Like, it's like a slap in the face all of a sudden. It like wakes you up, like an electric shock or a shock to your nervous system. And even it's not just, I mean, you can be desensitized to it by overuse, but it's a physiological thing, not just some kind of like construct. Anyway, Mark A. Greener continues, the whole second piece is a curse, basically, and so the swearing is appropriate. That's a good point, yeah. Matching the intensity of the other language. Notice the most intense parts here are not really the swear words, but the actual situation being described so vividly. Excellent point, yeah. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Mark. He also says, I like the misspelling of Muslim here. It catches the sense of the real language on the street. Yeah, it does too. And the the intention to offend in the speech too. Let's see. Yeah, and so other people say, yeah, James Casillo just says, love it, powerful from a deep place. Awesome poem, fantastic. So everybody just likes this poem, and I do too. I think it's a great poem. Over on YouTube, about the swearing, Caitlin Bucksbaum says, I think you just have to use it sparingly for it to be effective. And as far as publication, of course, it depends on the journals, but from what I've seen is that most of them are into it. Yeah, I can't imagine. I don't know a journal that wouldn't be. For the Young Poets Anthology, I try not to do it too much just because, people of all ages, like parents of all ages, are buying that. But even so, I don't want to censor the kids either. So it's it's always a tough question in that issue. And you'll see, subscribers will see the Young Poets Anthology is coming out next week. It should arrive. And the very first poem has a couple tough words in it, which I'm not sure. I don't know. It made me think about. But then, you want to be honest to the authors too. So it's tough to pull back too much. But sometimes I have. Like sometimes we'll say, this poem's a little bit too much for a 6-year-old who might also be reading it. But otherwise, I can't imagine any publications, unless you were like writing for O or something, or like you had a poem in Better Homes and Gardens or the New York. I mean, even the New York Times. I don't know. They probably wouldn't mind. Maybe they would. It's hard to imagine anybody who would hold back a poem, because as long as it was appropriate. If you're just dropping words like that constantly, it's sort of pointless, gratuitous or something. Anyway, I think that is all I have to say. Vicky Miko says, talking about this last poem, it is an affecting poem. I like ampersands. And what about the italic use? Yeah, everything is great. The italic use for the other languages. I wonder how much, I'm kind of curious just to know how much revision went into this. It feels very spontaneous, like it just poured out, which is how the best poems feel. But I wonder too if it started out more like this and then it built into what it became through revision. But the italics are used great to do the language of other people. And the ampersands and the lack of any kind of end stop just makes the poem keep flowing and rolling into that end where you don't know what's going to happen. And that's such drama that's building up there. So it's just a good poem. Wish I had some suggestions, but just good stuff. So anyway, that is your critique of the week today. Thanks so much for Fareh Malik to share these two poems with us. Once again, it was after 9/11, war spilled into our hometowns, and a temporary faith. And maybe you can Google that and find where that poem was published. I won't do it right now, but I'll do it after the show's over. I'm curious. But thanks for sharing those poems, and thanks for joining us on the critique of the week. Now, as always, the let's see, next week, yes, or no. First of all, I'm going to say the open mic show is going to be Sunday, noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific for Poetry Spun Live for any poems you have about current events. This will actually be, I think, this will be the last Poetry Spun Live show that is on its own. So what we're going to do starting the next Sunday is we're going to have Poetry Spun Live sort of kicking off like a pre-show, the Rattlecast every week. So there's going to be one show. We'll have Poetry Spun Live first for a little bit to sort of get warmed up and get into poetry. Then after like a half an hour, we'll be joined by our guest. And then we'll do the open lines afterwards. We'll have some open lines before, some open lines after, maybe 2 guests, because we'll try to include the poet that we published on Sunday. And that way we'll get everything that's great into the podcast, which I'd like to do, and also sort of just have crossover between the news poems and the interview. Anyway, so that's the last Sunday Poetry Spun Live all by itself, but there'll still always be Poetry Spun Live on Sundays. It'll just be merged later. And then this week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be Karen McCadden and her new book, American Wake. Karen's been a great poet, been in several issues of Rattle. Really looking forward to talking to her about poetry and this new book. The prompt for this week was to use the random article feature. It's in the side column at Wikipedia. So go to Wikipedia, click random article, and then write a poem inspired by whatever random article comes up. So that should be interesting too. That is your prompt for this or whatever it's called, Rattlecast prompt. Rattlecast number 94 with Karen McCadden, Tuesday, May 25th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. See you then, and I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. See you Sunday, if not Tuesday. Bye.